What to expect from the 2019 Mazda 3, the all-new generation, here with a prototype vehicle today, and what is the Skyactiv-X engine? It is an engine which is basically a mixture of a petrol and a diesel engine, a Diesotto, as we could say in Germany, for example. A very exciting topic because we're all talking about different engine concepts, electric, CNG, what is Mazda doing? Can you also actually just improve the ICE, the internal combustion engine? We'll talk about this new engine concept and we'll also drive it with this vehicle here today. All of these topics, of course, in Autogefühl, in full HD, full screen and full length. Let's go! And before we take a look at the new technology aspects, we'll take a look at how it might look like. And one hint gives the Kai concept, which was recently presented. And here we have it on stage now. And what you can see is that the front grille, we already know that from the all-new CX-5, it's more sculptural, also has this 3D effect, also with the front logo. In this case, the front hood also goes all the way to the front. And what you can especially see in the side profile, well, the rims won't be that big on the real car, but the main design scheme is that we have less design line actually, that they're going back to simplicity. And we have some more other examples, for example, Audi, which are going in the other direction, more design lines, more stuff to look at, whereas Mercedes recently also said, let's be more pure again. And that's also what Mazda is doing, inspired by Japanese art and design, to make it actually simpler again, but then maybe even more elegant and timeless. And we can especially see it here, where in the most cars nowadays we see a design dropping line here at the height of the door handles. You can see also the, divided by light and shadow, but still there's no real dropping line, there's just a sculptural shade. And then it goes all the way to the back. And the most interesting part of this vehicle is that the seat pillar is also basically a seamless transition to the rear end. If that would be the real car, you would probably lose a little bit too much trunk in height and also in the width. So the real car will probably be a little bit wider to give you more flexibility than as a customer for the inside of the trunk. But we can at least see in which design direction the new Mazda 3 is going, and probably also future Mazda models. Finally, if we come to the rear, most interesting part for me are definitely the rear lights. If that is allowed by regulation, I would at the moment say no, probably not. This will be covered then by glass, also for safety reasons and for durability. But the new design language also for the LED signature is really interesting, also corresponding to the exhaust pipes, which are in this case, well, probably real. We've seen a lot of fake exhaust pipes nowadays that you can actually combine any kind of engine with the same design on the rear. But what we've seen from Mazda recently is that we still have also models with real exhaust pipes. Here with a sporty carbon fiber rear diffuser, too expensive of course for a normal Mazda 3, only here for the show car. But in general we also see the scheme that everything is drawn horizontally, also with wider rear lights. And again the very sculptural form. Also not with too many lines, but again with a floating line. So it is actually a concept car, yes, but it's supposed to be not that far away from the real new Mazda 3. I want to hear your opinion. What about the design? So looking at that one here today and then combining later on the driving experience, which will be very exciting, I can promise you, we can actually give a very good image of what the new Mazda 3 will become. So today, not a normal review. You can check the current Mazda 3 review out on Autogefühl 2. We will link that video. With the 2019 all-new generation of the Mazda 3, there will be 3 crucial changes. A new chassis with a new philosophy also. Then new interior, especially new seats. We're soon going to show you those. And a new engine concept too that will come to the normal petrol engines and the diesel engines. So far, Mazda has been still using naturally aspirated engines, not doing this downsizing with turbo. And this one here, well, it's covered as it's a prototype vehicle. This one is the new Skyactiv-X. 2 liters of displacement, just as the Skyactiv-G with 2 liters of displacement currently in the Mazda 3. At the moment, it can be bought, for example, with 120 or 165 horsepower. This new Skyactiv-X supposed to have 190 horsepower, and now it's getting really exciting. What do they want to do? Well, it is basically a mixture of a petrol and a diesel engine. So a petrol engine has advantages, and a diesel engine has advantages. You know, the petrol engine doesn't have the NOx emissions, for example. The diesel engine consumes less fuel, is more efficient in general. So this is still a petrol engine from the base layout. And usually for petrol engines, you are using a spark to ignite the fuel and the air. And with a diesel, that's why they are, for example, also called Selbstzünder in Germany. They basically ignite themselves by the compression of the air. And this engine can do both. So there's still a spark using, the normal spark ignition from the petrol engine, but it's just using, let's say, a fracture of it. Just, not the whole combustion chamber, but it can also ignite by the pure compression like a diesel does. And by combining those two, Mazda promises us that you will use 20% less of fuel. At the same time, you should have 30% more torque. We will drive it today and show you about the lean mixture. That's about the ratio of air and fuel. There can be a ratio where you have, for example, have too much air. You can also see that in this picture here. Or you can have exactly the same amount, or you can have more air than fuel. That's what's happening here. And so no fuel is left unburnt. Very exciting approach, and one way to improve the efficiency and not to go for a completely different engine concept. Let's take a look inside here. Of course, this is all basically unfinished. You can see some prototype parts here in the middle part. Also very funny here with the gear shifter, for example. That's of course everything for testing purposes. But what is actually already new are those seats. And those seats have been completely redesigned. So for the all-new Mazda 3, they have a different seat form. The surface doesn't look too different than the one we get at the moment, but indeed the seat form and also, what is underneath the seat is actually really changed. Now I can just, take a seat and test it. And the thing is, what did they want to do? They want to have the pelvis upright. So that it's, not like in a typical car seating position, a little bit like this. That it's more like, in that all of the axes of the body are more like when you're, for example, walking, and also this typical S form of the spine then. And well, so far, the first impression is quite good. Of course, we have to really measure it when we drive it for a longer time. We'll soon also have a driving part with a new engine. Then I can maybe tell you even more about it. But, first impression is actually quite good, and also definitely improvement if you compare it to the previous seat or to the current seat as we still get it in the model. And I think the whole approach to begin with the driver or begin with human and then build the car around it, I think that's quite promising. And of course, also one reason why SUVs are getting more and more popular, because they usually offer you a more comfortable seating position. And this philosophy they also want to put onto their non-SUV cars now. So you've already seen this model of the engine, this one-to-one model, while I was talking. Now just a short detailed look on it, because we have the fuel system up here, this part here, then you have the 4 cylinders, and very interesting, this one here is a lean compressor, and that means it's not purely naturally aspirated anymore. So you do have a compressor, but it's not always active. That's the key factor. And you also have, that is behind this part here, a mild hybrid system, that the car is somewhat electrified, but of course not in a real battery electric vehicle sense. The mild hybrids we've recently seen with a lot of manufacturers, that for example sailing or coasting is available actually. And this is a first look at the new platform. There will be 2 new platforms, which then different vehicles will build on. This one here will be used for the Mazda3, for the all-new model. And the key factor is that they use more high-strength steel to get more rigidity to the whole platform. And, especially around the key areas, they have strengthened it all up to also make a better, sportier, but same comfortable riding experience. So in both ways better. I always love to see those colorway models, because you can see a lot of different details which you cannot usually see. And one of them is, for example, also the B-pillar. They have worked on the noise insulation too. And this one here is the complete B-pillar, as you can see it here in the model. But if you take a look at it closely right here, this is basically the B-pillar as we've seen it, like it is at the vehicle. But then if we basically open it from the back side, we can see that in this new B-pillar there will be those dampers. Actually, quite easy solution, but as this one here dampens between this and this part, there will be less noise, especially around your head. And this is a very important area, because that's where the perceived noise would be really big. So let's now do the driving part with this new Skyactiv-X engine. And the funny thing is, I do have a display here which shows me when just the spark ignition is active, when the compression is active, the compression ignition, and the third step when the compression ignition would be the most efficient one. So one close-up for you here at the display. Here, there's the third green dot. When I'm really, really gently on the throttle, there's the spark mode, normal petrol mode, and the second mode would be the normal compression mode. Third, then again, the high efficient compression. It really depends on the throttle input. So if I really push the throttle first, like the first second you see, just the normal spark mode. Then if I'm normal on the throttle, the normal compression, the dieseling mode. And when I leave the throttle just a little bit, maybe get in 4th gear, then go off the throttle, you see, then I'm always on the edge, either, shutting it off completely or in this very efficient mode. So it's switching from time to time, but most of the time it's really in this mode. When you're normally controlling the car, it's in normal compression mode here. And I think one of the most important experiences, it's always a smooth transition. If I wouldn't have the display, I would not really feel it. I do remember that with the normal Skyactiv-G, with the 2-liter petrol engine, naturally aspirated, we used last time about 7 liters on 100 kilometers. And if the prediction of Mazda is true, this one then here is supposed to only consume 5.5 liters approximately. Unfortunately, as those ones here are the prototype vehicles, we will not be able to see the real consumption figure the car is maybe showing us, but we can tell you something about how the car does behave and if this compression mode is working. And basically, so far, we are in it all the time. I will tell you if that is changing, at some point. You might ask yourself, why is not every manufacturer doing that? It's not a new idea. Mercedes has also been experimenting with that a couple of years ago. But then again, this one here is basically the first time that it will brought to the market in that standard serial style, because you have to control this ignition, that it doesn't get, just blown out, that it's not, that it has the power, but at the same time, it shouldn't get out of control and break the engine. So it has to be in the exact right spot. And that's what Mazda claims they have obviously managed. So this vehicle here is basically somewhat feeling like a normal Mazda 3. What do I feel for the differences now? As this is actually, with new chassis and insulation parts, also with the new seats and with the new engine, all the three major aspects we've talked about. So first of all, the engine itself, it feels pretty calm and light to ride. If you compare it to the normal one I've driven the last time, it indeed feels really more powerful. It has more horsepower, or will have more horsepower, yes, but that's not only it. With the new Skyactiv-X technology, you will also have more torque. That's also one of the major aspects here. And wow, if I accelerate out here, for example, to catch up to our convoy, so we're forming some kind of motorcade here, then you feel it's really powerful. And of course, there is the supercharger that is working. And so far, we only had the naturally aspirated engines from Mazda. So that is definitely a difference. Well, there's one downside of that. So due to this partially working supercharger, this engine might then again need a particle filter, which they didn't need before. They're not exactly sure yet if that will be the case. We will keep you updated on that for sure. But I can tell you, with the predecessor engine, let's call it that way, you really have to push it more. This one here, also from the lower RPM regions, is easily accessible in the power, and especially with the 120 horsepower version, for example, that when you really had to go up with the RPMs. And so this one here also gives you a calmer ride. Indeed, you already feel a better noise insulation. Remember this part I showed you with the B pillar? That is something which is making a difference, for example. Also, the visibility here is very good. Now we're driving a little bit faster, and even if I hammer it, it still remains in this compression mode. It's a 6-speed manual. There will also be an automatic transmission, so both can be fitted. This engine can also be fitted to higher or lower displacement figures. So this is also to come then later on in maybe in other cars, other power figures. Wow, it's really a lot of fun with this engine. See, I already get a good speed at about 2,000, 3,000 RPM. That's pretty promising. Of course, you can just say, they put a supercharger in there or put a turbocharger in there, and then that's the difference. The question is really, what about the consumption? And concerning the internal Mazda test, it's working, that the consumption does not go up, but down at the same time. Of course, this has to be verified by a source like us at the later stage. Then I would have loved to do that here today. And I really had some discussions, but it was unfortunately not possible. They couldn't make an exception yet, but we'll definitely keep you updated on that. But I can already tell you that this engine is probably among the most fun Mazda engines I've driven so far. Well, in the MX-5 maybe. But that one, of course, because the car is just lighter. By the way, there won't be many more gears. We have today 8-speed automatic transmissions. There are even 9-speed, 10-speed automatic transmission in the development. Why are they doing that, the manufacturers? Well, the reason is that you want to have in each gear the RPM figure at the most efficient way. And therefore you need more gears then to improve the efficiency. This engine here, however, also has the characteristic that it doesn't need so many gears because you're always burning at a proper ratio. So it is basically efficient throughout the widest span of the RPM regions. And that's similar to a diesel indeed again, because if you might have the experience in driving a petrol engine, low RPM and really hammering it, it will have massive differences in the consumption overall. If you drive a diesel, it will still have a consumption difference if you really hammer it or if you drive it slowly. However, the difference between really hammering a diesel and driving it slowly will not be as big as with the petrol engine. And that's the prospect also for this engine. I think also one of the key elements here. So indeed, the driving is right on point. The seats are indeed more comfortable. I can prove that now. So seating wise, it feels a little bit more like in a mid-size vehicle, for example. And so far, the Mazda 3 wasn't exactly the most comfortable compact car. It wasn't bad at all, but I think this one will definitely give an improvement. And the seating position also feels sporty at the same time. So I'm not sure exactly why, but it does somehow. And together with this more powerful engine, it really gives you a more fun driving experience. Earlier, we also featured this G-vectoring control, the new technology Mazda has implemented, I think it was last year. This one is also improving the ride a little bit, that you have less G-force on your body when riding. At the same time, you're a little bit faster through the corners. So this is, of course, again implemented in this vehicle here too. And so step by step, they're coming closer to this driving experience they're offering. So my impressions are from the 2019 Mazda 3, what we can experience here technology-wise. It is more fun to drive it. The chassis also feels stiffer. Got a good steering input here. It's really direct from what I can do with the steering too. They've worked on that. Engine gives you very good power. It's actually quite silent for that. And I would definitely prefer it over a diesel. I just hope it will be less expensive than a diesel. That is, that's of course a crucial point. And we're basically driving all the time in this compression mode. So the key thing, that's the only thing I cannot tell so far if it really works with the consumption figure-wise. Other than that, I think very promising developments we've seen here. Of course, we'll keep you updated then with the world premiere or with the very first driving review then next year from the real vehicle. And now as a comparison, the current Mazda 3, the normal production model, and wow, this is really helpful to do that since it is really louder in here. I'm not sure if you can also hear that on the camera.
I can confirm that.
Yeah, okay, Michel, cameraman today, confirms it. So that's really remarkable. So the new car will be way more silent. One of the things they also worked on is the tire noise that's coming to the cabin. That's also, one of the main aspects. And of course, well, you don't have this compressor in here. You have the normal, naturally aspirated engine, and not so much is happening when you press the throttle. So it's still somewhat a good engine. Consumption here is, by the way, almost confirming what we scored last time, 7.5 liters. And we hope the Skyactiv-X engine to be less in the consumption. But one thing is for sure, that the performance is better. So this one here, I really have to push a little bit more. The other one, I can drive smoother on the one hand, because I don't have to push it that hard. At the same time, it's also, more proactive, so I can react on the situations better. Here is always, especially now in a direct comparison, like you were driving with a delay a little bit. Now I'm going more towards 4,000 RPM, and before, for example, to catch up with the vehicle in front of me, I'm really struggling a little bit engine-wise. Well, the driving characteristics is also interesting. The steering input is not as direct as with the new platform vehicle, and the whole vehicle feels a little bit more, naturally bound to the driver. That is what Mazda calls Jin by Itai. It's some, marketing slang that's about unity of horse and rider. In this part, unity of car and driver. And well, I didn't feel it so far here in the current Mazda 3, but it's really better done in a new model. That is really remarkable. And it might also have something to do with the seating position. So the interesting thing was it felt lower and sportier, but at the same time it was more comfortable. Now, only after, shorter while, in the direct comparison to the new model, I feel that my lower back is getting, a little bit fatigued. And that was not at all the case in the new car. Really remarkable. So it's very helpful to drive the current vehicle and the new generation directly after each other. I would like to do that, even more often. And it seems to be that, you've maybe seen the concept vehicle there from Mazda for the new Mazda 3. Yeah, of course, will be a little bit more dramatic, more horizontally drawn headlights and stuff. But the real changes we can prove now from riding the predecessor generation, the real changes are underneath what you can really see. Wow, now especially again the sound is so... Actually, it was not a bad vehicle here, the Mazda 3. But if you step from the new platform, the prospect from our exclusive preview here to this car, this one here really feels really inferior actually. Now to our conclusion for today. We had a lot of different single elements, but from all those elements we can put them together and give you actually a quite good image of what the Mazda 3 will become. And of course, future technology engine-wise for the whole Mazda brand, and also design-wise for the whole Mazda brand. So a very interesting insight there for us, of course, and then also for you. So design-wise, we overall see, especially for the Mazda 3 and also the models coming ahead, less spectacular design lines, more purity in design. And me personally, I think it's a good choice because all of the past models, if you think about design icons with the Jaguar E-Type, all those cars had basic shapes that make them timeless. We will also see something like that in the interior, delivering you more space, more spacious feeling, also more ergonomic elements, which we've seen in our seat preview. So it's definitely becoming more comfortable. I think one of the main aspects for sure, and that was also something which we could compare from driving the new model, the prototype, and the current production vehicle. It was really way more comfortable, especially in seating. And then, of course, technology-wise, very interesting. The engine was quite powerful. Also, then again, together with the good sound insulation that gave us a really promising ride. The question is then again if the consumption figures will really go down that way as they promise. That one will be updated here on Autogefühl at the later stage. Overall, of course, what's about your feedback? The design and the technology we've shown you here today. Really interesting for us. And of course, please join us next time. Thank you so much for watching.